Welcome back to the Vale Echo. Tonight, we travel deep into the forgotten woods of Northern California, a place where the trees whisper secrets and the fog hides more than it reveals. This is the story of Cabin 28 and the night that turned a quiet resort into one of America's most haunting mysteries. It was the spring of 1981 in the small town of Keddie. The resort, once alive with laughter and summer travelers, had grown eerily quiet. Only a few cabins were still occupied, tucked between tall pine trees and drifting mist. Locals said that after dark, the forest felt different, like something unseen was watching. Cabin 28 stood near the edge of the resort, its wooden walls worn and pale under the moonlight. That night, a single bulb glowed dimly on the porch, swaying with the breeze. Inside, the Sharp family sat together, a mother, her children, and a few friends. It was ordinary, peaceful, the kind of night that feels safe, but outside something had changed. The fog thickened, the forest fell silent, even the crickets stopped. In the shadows beyond the cabin's window, a figure watched, motionless, waiting. Only the faint reflection of a blade caught the light. No one inside noticed the door just slightly ajar or the cold draft sneaking in through the cracks. At 2 a.m., the stillness shattered. A sound, sharp, sudden, echoed through the woods. The porch light flickered. Inside, the living room erupted in chaos. A struggle, a scream, the sound of something breaking. The silence that followed was heavier than the air itself. By morning, mist curled through the forest again, hiding what the night had done. The old wooden sign that read Keddie Resort leaned broken against the path. Birds sang as if nothing had happened. But behind the thin curtains of Cabin 28, horror lingered, a scene so violent, so unexplainable it would scar the town forever. When the first deputy arrived, he stepped out of his car and froze. The air was cold, unnaturally still. The door of the cabin hung open, creaking gently. Inside, the living room was a storm of destruction, overturned furniture, dark stains on the walls, and the silence of death. The family who had laughed hours earlier was gone. No footprints led away from the cabin, no sign of forced entry, only the impression that whoever or whatever came that night had vanished back into the woods. Some say it was a crime. Others believe it was something far darker, that the forest around Keddie held a secret, one that refused to be buried. And as the years passed, Cabin 28 stood empty, a ghost among the trees. Locals would drive by, swear they saw a flicker of light in its windows or a figure in the fog, but no one stayed long enough to find out. Because the night in the pines never really ended, it just keeps repeating itself. When dawn broke over Keddie, the first light of day revealed what the darkness had tried to hide. Police cars surrounded Cabin 28, their red and blue lights cutting through the fog like warnings from another world. Officers moved cautiously, their boots crunching against the gravel, their faces pale as they stepped inside. The living room was a nightmare frozen in time. Blood spattered across the wooden walls, a hammer and a knife lying abandoned on the floor, tools of terror that spoke of rage and silence. The furniture was overturned, the curtains torn, and yet something didn't add up. No signs of forced entry, no missing valuables, nothing but chaos and fear sealed behind thin cabin walls. Detectives arrived soon after, setting up tape and flashlights. They whispered in low voices, glancing at one another with unease. One of them pointed to a trail, small, faint, leading toward the back door, but it vanished halfway through the porch as if the footsteps had simply stopped existing. The sheriff stood near the window, gazing at the forest outside. "They didn't walk out," he said quietly. "Something else happened here." His words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. As news spread, reporters swarmed the small town. Headlines screamed across California, "Cabin 28 murders shock rural community." Black and white photos of the victims filled the newspapers, a mother, her children, and a friend, their smiles hauntingly still. The crime scene photos leaked later, disturbing the world with the sheer brutality of it all. People began to whisper that no ordinary human could have done this. Inside the sheriff's office, an evidence board filled the wall. Strings connected photos, maps, and theories, suspects, sightings, timelines, but every line led back to the same cabin and no further. Detectives debated motives, theories, names, but the truth kept slipping through their fingers like smoke. Then came the strange reports. Locals who passed by Cabin 28 at night claimed to see flickering lights through the broken windows or shadows moving inside when no one was there. One deputy said he heard faint whispers near the tree line, voices calling names that no one alive remembered. Paranormal investigators later visited, hoping to document what the police could not explain. Their equipment malfunctioned near the cabin. Batteries drained instantly, recordings filled with static, and once in that static, a faint voice was captured. It said just 3 words: "We're still here." Years passed, but the mystery only grew darker. The cabin remained untouched, a grim reminder of that unsolved night. No one claimed responsibility. No one was ever arrested. The case files gathered dust, marked with 2 chilling words: unresolved mystery. Some said the evil came from a person. Others believed it came from the cabin itself, as if something ancient had awakened there and demanded blood. And in the quiet of the forest, where the mist never seems to lift, locals still swear they can hear the faint echo of that night, the creak of a door, a muffled cry, and the heavy silence that followed. The silence that still lingers in the shadows of Cabin 28 decades past, and time tried to bury the memory of Cabin 28 beneath dust and decay. The once bustling Keddie resort had long since vanished, reclaimed by the forest that whispered its secrets to no one. But legends have roots deeper than the pines, and some stories refuse to die. The cabin stood hollow now, a skeleton of its former self. Windows shattered, wood blackened with age, and ivy crawling up its sides like nature's slow revenge. Locals warned travelers not to go near it, especially after sunset. But in the age of curiosity and cameras, warnings are invitations. One autumn evening, a group of urban explorers arrived with flashlights and recording gear. The air was cold, unnaturally still. As they stepped through the doorway, the beam of their lights caught something: the faint outline of handprints across the dust-covered walls, each print small, delicate, and impossibly fresh. Inside, the explorers moved slowly, documenting every creak and echo. One of them noticed a photograph tucked behind a fallen frame, a smiling family standing in front of Cabin 28 decades earlier. Their eyes seemed to follow the lens, frozen in time, hauntingly familiar. As the explorers pressed deeper, whispers filled the air, faint, almost human, but layered, like many voices speaking at once. Their recording devices flickered, batteries draining faster than they could replace them. One camera caught a fleeting reflection in a cracked mirror, a pale face standing behind them, gone when they turned around. Outside, the forest shifted. A low wind rose from nowhere, carrying the smell of old wood and rain. One of them thought they saw movement, a shadow darting between the trees. When they turned their flashlights toward it, nothing but fog stared back. Hours later, they set up EVP equipment in the center of the cabin. The devices hissed with static, then fell silent. A long pause, then a voice emerged, soft, broken: "Don't forget us." They fled, but before leaving, one looked back. Through the broken window, the faintest red light glowed from within, like the cabin's heart still beating in the dark. Years after that night, paranormal investigators returned with modern tools: thermal cameras, sensors, digital recorders. What they captured was chilling: faint figures near the fireplace, a woman's silhouette standing at the door, and orbs drifting across the decayed living room like lost souls trying to find peace. Experts dismissed it as dust, tricks of light, imagination. But those who have stood at the edge of that forest know the truth: that something still breathes there, something waiting. Today, Cabin 28 no longer stands. It was torn down to erase the memory of that horror. Yet those who pass through Keddie swear they still see a faint structure in the mist, a cabin that shouldn't exist, standing for just a heartbeat before fading away. And sometimes, if you listen closely, the forest speaks, with a voice that sounds like wind or maybe something else. Because some stories don't end when the house falls, they echo forever, through time, through silence, through the unseen. And somewhere deep in those woods, Cabin 28 is still waiting.